Hi, guys. Welcome to tonight's live chat. I'm glad to see you guys. See you chatting away already. I see Instagram is creating problems for me again. So let me go ahead and fix that, guys. It's so good to see you. Glad you're here with me tonight. I'm going to go ahead and fix Instagram again. I don't know why it doesn't like me. It just doesn't. It doesn't click on like all the other platforms, but we're going to fix that one day. So glad to see you guys. It's been a very busy week. I hope you guys have gotten through the week okay. By the time I hit Wednesday, I know a lot of you could probably relate to this. By the time I hit Wednesday, I feel like, okay, I have some momentum. I can get through the week and then it's over. It's like I only have enough energy for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then I'm down, But hopefully you guys had a pretty good week and things are going well for you. Okay, it looks like Instagram is working. So we can go ahead and jump in. I do have somewhere to be. There we go. I do have somewhere to be by 7:30. So I'm going to do like a hard stop, if you will. I'm going to stop around 7:30. Let me welcome to the chat. I'm going to welcome Instagram. Welcome to the chat. I'm going to say, guys, come join us on my channel for a community experience. Okay. Awesome. Instagram is looking good. Glad to see you guys. Glad we can talk about this live. I did a video that I had to post on Wednesday. It was a really bad posting time because my videos tend to take off on Monday or Tuesday nights, where most of my channel supporters and my clients, they know that I am on Monday and Tuesday. So when I had to post it on Wednesday, it was so slow. And it didn't do as well as I would have liked it to have done because it was posted on a Wednesday. And I wasn't able to be present. I was there a little bit in the chat box, but not a lot. So I'm glad we get to talk about this live, because what we didn't talk about then, we can talk about now. And it allows me to give you a little more of an up-close experience than a pre-recorded video where I'm talking at you. You know what I mean? So we're going to jump in. I don't even know how to start this conversation. I just, maybe I'll start this way. I'll tell you what my personal opinion is, and I'll tell you what my professional opinion is when it comes to lying. And then I'll tell you what my clinical experience has been. And then we're going to delve into some new terms. So you're probably going to want to listen out for those, just because I know you guys love the terms. So let's start with my personal view of people who tell lies. I have a really hard time with people who tell lies. I tend to be a very non-judgmental person. So I can handle just about anything that is on my table, on my desk, in my life, that a human being can bring to the table. If you bring to the table racist or prejudice or discriminatory views, I'm going to try to love you past that ignorance, right? And I'm going to say, you know what? That side of you is completely ignorant, out of tune, but I'm going to look for some good in you, and I'm going to cling on to that and try to get to know you and understand why you think as you do. Okay, so that's one view. Another person could bring arrogance and narcissism and pride to the table, and I will dislike that as well, but I will not refuse you. So I'm going to still look for the good if I can find it. I am going to treat you like a decent, loving human being that deserves love. But when it comes to a pathological liar, I can't do it. I just, there are those people, and you guys probably can relate to this. There are those people who tell little white lies, right? I'm going to be about 20 minutes late to my appointment because I got stuck in traffic. And there you are in the bathroom, brushing your teeth and, curling your hair, trying to get your gel, trying to spray. And you're there talking on the voicemail of maybe your boss, your therapist, your PCP office, saying, I am literally stuck on the parkway on the turnpike. and it is gridlocked, and there you are in the bathroom just clearly trying to get your makeup on or wash your face, or right. And so, okay, we can go with those little white lies. It doesn't cause too much harm, right? Kids tell little white lies. 3-year-olds, I had a 3-year-old today in the office, and he was cute as a button. Oh my God, the cutest little mushroom. And so we're talking, and I'm trying to get him to open up about his dad. And so he looks at me and says, "Miss Tamara, I'm 4." I says, "No, you're not, because the last time I saw you, okay, you were literally this high. And that was 2 days ago. So you can't be 4, because you don't look 4. You look to be about 2.5 or 3. He's technically 3. And he says to me, "Miss Tamara, I'm 4. And I said, "Okay, we're not going to play this game." And he was giggling, And so I thought this is the cutest thing, because he's 3 and he thinks that he's lying to me, and I'm going to believe it. So we've got this spectrum, right? Where we have that 3-year-old who's such a doll. He's so cute, right? He's 3. He doesn't get life. But then we also have in the middle of that spectrum, that individual who lies. They're in the bathroom, washing their face, brushing their teeth, trying to get their shoe on, telling the boss or the therapist, "I'm going to be late because I'm literally gridlocked in traffic." Okay, so that could be in the middle of the spectrum. And at the high end of the spectrum is what we clinicians and psychotherapists, we deal with all the time. And that's an individual that has little to no conscience, right? Or they engage in a repetitive behavior of lying because one, they've digested their lies so much so that everything becomes a lie, right? Or they are so disordered that they honestly do believe in their heart and in their soul that what they are saying to you is true. That is why sometimes lies can come across as very real. They're believable because some people clearly have a disordered way that they function in the world. And so, maybe that person truly believes their own lies and they tell them repeatedly. Then we also have, above that, we can also place the compulsive liar. Somebody on my comment section said to me earlier, "I'm struggling with the difference between a pathological and a compulsive liar." And I'll explain that in a minute. Some people use it interchangeably, but clinically, they are different things. And I'll get to that in just a second. But they could be a compulsive liar where you ask them an honest question. "Where do you work? What work do you do?" And they pause and they say, "Well, and they're trying to figure out, and you're like, "Where do you work again?" And they're still trying to figure out what to say. There's a anxiety there. There's a neuroticism there. So an inability to settle oneself and just answer the clear question without trying to understand what the person is asking that question for. Why am I being asked that question? Will they look at me differently if I say I work as a janitor, as a school aide, right? So there's some built-in embarrassment, shame, doubt, fear of being socially ostracized that's in that compulsive lie. And what happens when a person is kind of stuck, they just kind of say, "Oh, I work downtown as a manager of a corporation, and I'm being considered as CEO of the Hilton Hotel." When the reality is none of that is true. They work as a cleaning person, which is not a bad thing. My grandmother did it for so many years. She literally worked at, my late grandmother, she worked at 3 hotels. The Hyatt Hotel, for those of you who are around my age, the Hyatt, the Hilton, and the Marriott. And she was wonderful at her job, and she supported her entire family and her grandchildren on that particular job. But, I'm just saying there are some people who feel embarrassed that they work as a janitor, as a cleaning lady or cleaning man, or someone who does some kind of hospitality work, And so the compulsive liar just they can't hold it back. It's like those feelings on the inside causes them to kind of spit out, if you will, for lack of a clinical term, the lie. And once it's out, here's what they do. They try to reel it back in. It's like, oh, let me pull that back. No, I don't really work as a CEO, and I'm not really being considered for a managerial role. But I do work there. I just don't do the field that you think I do, right? And I've had compulsive liars in my office. And sometimes the very first appointment is a demonstration of what I'm going to get down the line. Somebody sits in front of me and they want therapy or treatment for themselves, their spouse, or their family. And they say to me, we're having all these problems. I don't know why. And I get to the question on my intake form. I get to the question that says your first and last name and what do you do for a living? And as soon as I say, and could you remind me what you do for a living? I don't know if I asked you that. Sometimes they will say, I work in the hospitality field. And that's so broad, right? And I'll say, okay. And so that means what do you do? And I'll try to, give them room to explain. And sometimes that anxiety in them is so ingrained that they say, oh, I'm just A, B, and C down there at the hotel. And you could literally see on their face sometimes that they want to take that back. They want to take it back. They can't understand why they said those words. They know it's not true. They recognize it's going to mislead you, but there may also be some shame in the fact that it came out in the first place. So they're really not going to want to take that back too much, because then I'm going to see them as a liar. And so if I see that happening, then I recognize right there in the first appointment, we're going to deal with some issues here. Now, a pathological liar is something too, because a pathological liar lies, and lies, but without any clear benefit, decrease problems, or without any real goal directed behavior. Like they're not trying to they're not trying to cover something. They're not trying to hide their ego. They're not trying to cover their spouse who doesn't have a job right now, as an example. They are literally lying for the sole purpose of lying. And you also get those pathological liars who lie for the sole purpose of getting away with things and manipulating a situation and using people, manipulating the facts of a situation to get ahead, right? So often with a pathological liar, we can kind of split them into two, maybe more, but my experience clinically has been you can split a pathological liar in two. One side, they lie and there's no obvious benefit, and sometimes you'll get the pathological liar who lies for the sole purpose of getting somewhere. And so these kind of individuals are complicated, right, guys? Especially if they are close to you, as far as a spouse, a family member, a child. Sometimes, and this is the scary part, sometimes you could get a pathological liar who is a therapist, a pathological liar who is an attorney or a lawyer, and they skew things and change things and, really make things nebulous for you, where you're not really seeing what you should be seeing, because the person whom you think is a professional is actually a liar, and they skew things and they misinterpret reality and they see what they want to see. And that can be really scary. I'm sure maybe you have thought about it, but maybe you haven't, that even professionals can be pathological liars. We know politicians can be, but when we're talking about other individuals like doctors and lawyers and psychotherapists and teachers and educators, police, right? All the other fields in the world can also contain pathological liars. Just because they have a professional badge or a badge of honor, if you will, doesn't mean they aren't liars. They may have this kind of undercurrent lying kind of thing going on, where they don't necessarily tell outright lies, but they misinterpret reality and they sell it to other people in one way that it isn't. Or, they kind of mix wires sometimes. Maybe you're talking to this professional liar, and you're trying to explain something, and they're hearing something very different from what you're telling them, and you recognize that they either misquote you or they don't really hear you. And so, maybe they put something in your record that shouldn't be there, right? So pathological liars, compulsive liars, or people who live in their own reality can be scary and difficult to live with. Whether that's a personal or professional kind of a situation, it's difficult to live with. Now, let me also briefly throw this in here, that there is what some people call it an ego-driven life. And an ego-driven life is this: I lie to cover up that thing that kind of puts me and my ego on trial, right? So ego-driven lying is what we would call it. And that's when an individual says, you know what, I'm going to lie about A, B, and C because my self-esteem, I can't handle being truthful here. So an example of that could be, let's say your parents of 50 years are no longer getting along. Their marriage was kind of falling apart at one point, and you knew something was wrong with mom and dad, but you couldn't put your finger on it. And now that you visit them, you feel this internal sense that there's something different between them, and you don't like it, right? So you go to your mom and you say, Mom, are you and Dad okay? And your mom may say, yeah, why would you think any different? And you might say, I feel this tension in the room between you, and you guys don't laugh with each other like you used to. You don't really share the same ideology or ideas like you used to. I really feel like you guys are two different people. And your mom may say, what makes you think that? We are definitely not on the rocks. Nothing is going wrong. I am a woman of stature. I don't believe in divorce. And your dad is a powerful attorney, and he would never want to divorce me. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We have a lovely big home. We have money. We have access to resources. So we're going to go to therapy first before we file for divorce. And your brother's going to med school. Your cousin is going to become a high-powered attorney in the next couple of months. And your grandfather's running for political office. Do not worry about us. We are not divorcing. Boom. There's an ego-directed and ego-driven bunch of lies, right? Because here's what happens. I don't like that you're pulling out into the open this part of me that makes me feel like I haven't measured up. It makes me feel like I'm not being kind of respected, and I don't feel equal with you or other people in the world. So I'm going to pump the brakes right here and start looking at all the things that I think matters to myself and you. So I'm going to blow up some of our reality, or I'm going to lie. You guys have seen people like this. You might say, nice car. And how men are about their cars sometimes. And the other person that has the nice car may say, oh, thanks so much. I got 4 BMWs if you want to ever come and see them. They're classics, and you may say, oh my goodness, really? I'm actually in the market to look for a car. Well, come to my house, we'll have a couple of drinks. Maybe we'll sit down and have some lunch, and we can talk about my 4 BMWs. They're all in good working order, right? There's another ego-driven lie. Maybe he doesn't have 4 different BMWs at home, but he's going to tell you that, and coming down to his home to look at cars that may or may not exist is a problem. So we call that ego-driven lies. I'm going to boost myself or exaggerate what I have based on a lie or half-truths. And I do that because my motivation is to cloak, to seek validation, to seek praise, social power, and to feel like there's this equality between me and you. I'm not beneath you. I'm with you or above you. And that's where I want to be. And so I have what's called ego-driven lies, that's scary, right, guys? Because we know people like that. They like to blow up what they have. They like to remind themselves of what they have. And they do it in a way to cover up the truth. Excuse me. So that is ego-driven lies. Two more things I want to mention before I go to the chat box, because you guys are chatting it up. Elizabeth B. Eliza, is it Eliza? Eliza B, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. I just happened to look over and see what you said. Why not be honest? Exactly. I agree with that. They're not going to be honest because that hurts. That's why we call it ego driven. It's, Sigmund Freud had ideas about the ego, the id, the ego, the superego. And his idea was most of society is based on their ego. And there's a lot of ego driven things that will ultimately sink the person, right? So they're not going to be honest because that ego, that big ego that they carry on the inside has to be, what's the word I'm looking for? It has to be stroked. That's the word I'm looking for. Stroked in order for them to feel good. So they just lie. You know what I mean? Now, self-deception is an interesting twist because I think we all kind of, in some ways, engage in self-deception to protect our heart from pain. When in 2020, when my late grandmother passed away unexpectedly, she was a strong, healthy 82-year-old. And we're not talking about the 82-year-old who, bends over and walks with a cane and has a hard time keeping up. My grandmother was not 82. Like I really do believe psychologically she was like 70. She had good stamina. She was healthy. She was going to church, work, volunteering, traveling between her families, And so when she passed away, though, that process of the reality of that hitting me, and I think my family, was delayed because we had to care for her the months prior to her unexpected passing. And so in a sense, I think those of us who truly cared for her at the very end, it was myself, my older brother, and my mom. And so we were the three that kind of stayed close to her throughout every day, every night, every minute of her illness, back and forth to the hospital, the list goes on. During that scary, traumatic process, I truly believe we were all in self-denial. I think my older brother, who was like this with our grandmother, she was kind of like his mother, if you will, in a lot of ways. I think he self-deceived. He used to call her grandma. I called her guy, and he calls her grandma. So he would say, grandma's going to be all right. Even when we were in the hospital, he's like, I'm not even worried about grandma. Grandma's going to be okay. Did you realize grandma fought A, B, and C? Grandma did A, B, and C. And I would say, yeah, I remember that. He's like, so grandma's going to be okay. Then when I saw her in the hospital for the second time around, because she had pneumonia, I looked at her laying in the hospital bed and I thought, you're going to be all right. You're a fighter. And you taught me how to be a fighter. And I just knew she was coming out of that. And my own mother was at the hospital around the clock. And my mom had this hope as well that she was going to stick around. So we were all kind of in this place of self-deception because we loved her so very much. She was like the pillar of our lives, if you will. And so that self-deception is often there to cover a pain, a hurt, a fear. Irvin Yalom, who was well known for his existential thoughts, he says he believes that because we live in a painful reality, that sometimes our self-deception is needed and other times it can really cloak reality. And he said that there are 4 ultimate concerns with life where people lie, and that would be death. We were definitely self-deceiving when it came to death. We didn't think, oh my God, pneumonia would take my grandmother down. She's 82 years old. We didn't think that she wouldn't come home from the hospital the second time because she came home from the hospital the first time. We didn't think that she would kind of be in like a state of slight dementia a couple hours before she said goodbye. So death, right? That's one concern of life that we tend to kind of, that doesn't exist, The reality, and I'm coming to the chat box, guys, the reality is when it comes to death, we kind of squash that thought. We throw that thought behind, or we minimize it to some kind of belief system that is unhealthy. Oh, death doesn't exist. We live, right? Another thing that I've heard people say is, I don't believe in death. I think we go to sleep you know. Some other people, they have their own ideologies, you know. My family believes in the Christian ideology of I will see you again one day, you know. But in a sense, that kind of is a little bit of self-deception too, because do we really and honestly believe that? Do we really and honestly know that? Do we have proof of that? We do have the Bible that confirms that, right? And we hold on to that in hopes that that scripture, right, that we're going to come back again, or we're going to see our loved ones again, or they're going to be raised from the dust. We believe that that is exactly what's going to happen. So death, Irvin Yalom also said, you know, we tend to lie to ourselves about freedom. We have ultimate freedom, but sometimes that ultimate freedom can be painful. It can be misdirected. You kind of feel lost in life. Sometimes you don't know what to do with your freedom. So sometimes we lie to tell ourselves, you know what? I don't have to worry about A, B, and C. You know, I'm free and I'm doing what I want to do. I don't need to have a structured life, direction, goals, nothing. I'm living free, you know, while other people may say freedom scares the living daylights out of me because I don't know what to do with myself. Meaninglessness. That's another thing that we often lie to ourselves about, you know. And of course, isolation. We don't want to be isolated. Sometimes when we are isolated, we don't know how to get out, right? So Irvin Yalom says, these are the 4 concerns of life. And a lot of times we lie to ourselves. It's a process of self-deception that happens in that mode. Lastly, for pathological and compulsive liars, they can experience what used to be called a shared psychosis. It is now called delusional symptoms in a relationship with an individual with psychotic symptoms. Isn't that okay? I'm going to put this in the chat box. So it used to be shared psychosis. Oh God, who says it is now delusions with an individual with a relationship to an individual with psychosis. I bet you I botched that up. I'll correct it if I did. Shared psychosis. Here's what happens. You're healthy. The other person that you have a strong bond with is not healthy. The person that has the biggest problem, who is the person who believes like they believe, they are detrimental to your mental and emotional health. They believe things that are not true. They engage in self-deception and lies. They keep social experiences at a minimum because they want you to believe exactly what they believe. And a lot of times, these individuals are delusional. They are clinically delusional, and they believe things that are not true. And their delusions may be ego driven, like grandiose delusions. I'm God. I'm a real life angel. I can fly. I'm rich. I'm Oprah Winfrey, you know, whatever that delusion may be. I'm being a little silly there, but whatever that delusion may be, they want the other person to believe that, you know, as well. So what happens? You, as the healthy vessel, the healthy person, you get pulled into that world of psychosis that other person is in. And because you have that strong bond with them, mom, dad, sibling, romantic partner, husband, wife, you have that close bond, sometimes adopted child or even a biological child. You have such a close bond that what happens over time is you begin to believe their lies, and you begin to act in ways that supports their lies. And so not only are they delusional, but in a sense, you're becoming delusional as well. What breaks the other person or you from that delusional stage is when you guys are separated. And so mom's over there, whoever that bond you have with is over there, then you come over here and your reality starts to kind of come back to you a little at a time, because you recognize that, wait a minute, I can think, I can breathe, I can engage with the world. And that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. That's a lie, you know? And so people who have experienced what used to be called shared psychosis, they will tell you that it is a shift in mindset. You are taken away from other people's opinions, and there's strong emotional connection to that person who is delusional. And so it causes you to be delusional as well. So That's a lot. I gave you guys a lot of meat at the beginning of this live chat. We're actually at 7:30. My goodness. So I'm going to stretch this at least 20 minutes, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. Join me tomorrow because there's going to be more on this, but in a little bit of a different way. I'm going to go through some common issues, how to deal with these liars. I know you guys are going to want to hear that, and a little bit of the research. Okay. Denise Robinette, I'm going to start with you because I just happen to see you. Good to see you. Welcome, Denise. Glad to have you tonight. Denise says you are nailing it. Went through this with my siblings. Thank you for that, by the way. Went through this with my siblings while mom suffered from end stage Alzheimer's for many years. I was the black sheep. Yeah. That's a dynamic in and of itself. My goodness, that's hard. I applaud you. It's hard when your loved one has Alzheimer's disease, dementia. Oh my God. And then put a manipulative person in the middle of that. Ugh. It's like the wires are already confused. And then you put manipulation, in the midst. And it's like, oh God, why are we doing this? Cat Sushi, good to see you, my friend. Glad to see you in the chat box every time I see you. James McDonald, good to see you. Welcome back tonight. He says, evening, Tamara, and all. Sometimes the biggest lies we hear are the ones we tell ourselves. That is so very true. Self-deception, right, James? Yeah. We all do it. Even as a therapist, I find that whatever I'm emotionally passionate about, there are times when I self-deceive. I don't mean to, but it's a mindset that I end up taking on. And so the example was with my grandmother. I just knew she was going to come back to our life with her and continue going to church, continue selling her Avon, continue being that social butterfly she was. I'm an introvert. I can be sociable if I need to. It's a form of survival, but I'm the reader. I'm the let's sit on the couch and watch a good movie, or, let me go learn something or take a course or just exercise my mind. And so she would be the one, though, that would pull me out and say, come on, T. She would call me T all the time. Come on, T, we're going here. I'm like, oh, God, I don't want to go. As a little girl, she took me to her job. I hung out with her on the job. She was, like I said earlier, working at the Marriott, the Hilton, the Hyatt hotel, and she would take me to her work. And I would just be sitting there like this at 7, 8 years old, like, God, somebody rescue me. And then she would take me on her Avon trips where she would drive her orders to her customers, and she'd drag me there as well. Then she would drag me to her church, and she's singing and tambourines, and the list goes on. And I'm like, somebody rescue me because I'm losing it. She was very, very sociable, James, and for the rest of you. And so you're right that self-deception is often the biggest lie, because again, I just knew my lively, extroverted grandmother is going absolutely nowhere. How could I believe that? You know what I mean? But self-deception. So James, I very much agree. I'm so glad you said that. A and B, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Axe the Edge, good to see you. Ellie Wynn, the Good Glow. Somebody's excited. Good to see that. Welcome, the Good Glow. Welcome, Ellie Wynn. Good to see you guys. Phil Bradley, that's awesome. I'm so glad you feel ready. Good to see you. Laura Fitt, good to see you too. Yeah. Can you believe we're in August? James McDonald says, honesty is the best policy. Yep. Agree. Den Woke, hello and welcome. Good to see you tonight. MS. Yeah. Good. I'm glad. I hope you're doing okay. Yeah, I'm glad you're ready though. Good to see you. So MS and Juby Joe and Jessica J. Emerge 777. Thank you for that. Team Max, Sun and Sunflowers. Thank you for correcting that. I appreciate you for that. Welcome to all of you. Good to see you tonight. Excuse me. Ronald Zion, good to see you. Welcome back. I know this looks strange. Guys, it is a protein. It's an electrolyte water pack. I don't want you to do what my kid did today in therapy. I didn't have my water bottle. and I had to put the protein pack in here. And my 12-year-old client was like, Miss Tamara, I didn't know you were like that. And I'm like, what the heck does that mean? And so he's just giggling and giggling. And it occurred to me. And I says, it's a protein shake. Just chill out. So letting you guys know, just in case you were wondering. Ronald Zion, good to see you, my friend. Fairy Girl, always glad to see you in the chat box. Thank you so much. No date night here. Oh no. You got to be someone truly special. I hate to say that. No, I'm kidding. No, actually, I'm being honest. This is like 50% truth, 50% I'm just trying to joke with you. But thank you so much for that. That's kind. Thank you. JKL Pop, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Johan Kobe, hello and welcome. It was very busy. I just barely made it. I hope you had a really good week. Hope you're doing okay as well. Valerie K. Roberts, good to see you as well. Welcome to the channel. I don't remember seeing you. Princess, I don't remember seeing you, so welcome to the channel. She says, same here. I can't stand pathological liars. Yeah. It's something about them. They just undermine not only their credibility, but your credibility. It's like, why do you think I'm going to believe this? You know, it irks me. Okay, let me keep moving, guys. Maria Santana, good to see you as well. Glad you could come back and be with us. The Good Glow says, when I'm on the phone talking to someone and it's one-sided where I can't get a word in, I'll say, oh, I have another call, so let me talk to you later. I know I'm not the only one. You're not the other one. You're not the only one. No. No. I was trying to think if I have a story for that. You're not the only one. That's a little white lie, though. You know, I kind of feel like you have a reason for that. And in a sense, it's a little bit educational because you're telling that other person, I don't have time for this. You're not going to let me talk. You're not going to pause and catch a breath, swallow or something. Then I have to go. Like, this is a two-way communication, you know? Bo, good to have you. Glad to see you tonight. Doberman Mama, haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you back tonight. Doberman Mama says, at the same time, I don't think it's appropriate for strangers to walk up to you and ask what your job is. I have people do that a lot. I always say, would you like to know? Yeah, I think it all depends on context, right? You know, I'll give you an example from my own personal life. When I go to doctor's appointments, you know, like I saw my cardiologist a couple of days ago. I didn't mention what I do for a living. After seeing my cardiologist, she says to me, seeing my cardiologist 3 times in a month, she finally said to me, what is it that you do for a living again? And I said, oh, I'm a psychotherapist in private practice. And she's like, what? And her disposition was, then I could have been told you why your heart rate is up all the time, you know? So I didn't mention it there. You know, when we're in different places, like when my family and I are in different places, like we went out of the country a couple times. We've gone to different states. You know, one time it was my mom and I, we drove down to Atlanta, Georgia for a conference that I had. And, you know, I just didn't want to tell people what my profession was because it makes it awkward. You know, some people think that you can read that, you know how it is. You see somebody, they say, I'm a clinical psychologist, or I'm a clinical psychotherapist, or I'm a behaviorist. They look like, oh God. So I don't tell people that. Even when they ask me, sometimes I say, you know, I see kids for a living. I'll downplay it, you know? So I totally get that, Doberman Mama. It really depends on the dynamic. It's the dynamic, you know? Peach Gumi? Is that right? Oh, that's kind of cute. Hello and welcome. Good to have you on the channel. Peach Gumi says, do they ever feel any embarrassment? No. And we're going to get to that in just a few seconds. They don't feel embarrassment because they are either completely devoid of embarrassment and shame, right? Or they are what did I say? Devoid is really absent of guilt and shame. But they also have what we call delayed shame or guilt. And if they have delayed shame or guilt, it's not going to hit them in the moment that they lie. You know, compulsive liars kind of go through this. It hits them way after the fact. So maybe the next day when they wake up in the morning and they sit up in bed and they may think, why did I say that yesterday? Why did I even go there? You know? So my mom tells a story about one of her friends from childhood. She said, I could literally feel when Jeannie was talking to me, that was her former friend's name. When Jeannie was talking to me, I knew it was all a lie. She told me about her dating life, told me about her education, told me about, you know, buying herself a new home and a car. She says, and when she passed away, I found out none of it was true. And my mom said when she was talking to me, though, I could feel that all the things she was telling me was incorrect. It was a lie. And it was a puffed up lie, which can come across as truth until the pieces start, you know, kind of clicking together. So it's kind of sad, right? Valerie, is it Kay Roberts, liked what I said when I said professionals can be liars using their title to lie, she says. Yeah, very much agree with that. You know, there are some professionals who know that they clearly don't have the skill to work on that diagnosis, to work with that family, to work with that individual, to stand up in the field and say, I have true clinical experience, you know? And so there are some people who can't say that. So what do? They bolster themselves. They put their degrees up on the wall. They try to make it look good. But the moment you sit with them and you're looking for that feeling that you are in the hands of somebody who's got experience, when you don't feel that, but you see all the evidence around you, you may want to ask yourself, is this a cloak? Is this a lie? What is this? You know? And the same thing can be for attorneys and politicians, and the list goes on, you know? I think it's important to throw that out there. Okay, let me keep moving, guys, because I'm way behind. My friend Shmita, hello and welcome. Good to see you. Welcome tonight. Ronald Zion says, there's NA and AA. Is there any therapeutic community of accountability for chronic and pathological liars? That is an excellent question, Ronald Zion. I'm going to star that in the chat box. There is absolutely no support group for pathological and compulsive liars. You want to know why? Because pathological liars do not believe, and some compulsive liars too, that they have a problem. So here's what happens. The individual doesn't get to go to a support group because there are none. But what they can do, if they go see a therapist or they get a medical diagnosis, they can go to a group that talks about borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, avoidant personality, bipolar disorder. They kind of find themselves, compulsive and pathological liars, existing under mental diagnoses, you know? But there is no specific support group for people like that. And there's no support group for the victims of pathological liars either. So, Ronald Zion, we need to grow, don't we? Yeah. We should definitely have those groups. Jessica J says, I have no use for these lying fake people. There's no room in my life for these sick people, period. Yeah. Yeah. Even if they are at the mercy of a disorder, right? So a disorder that commonly is associated with pathological lying is narcissistic personality disorder. Another one is antisocial personality disorder, right? A sociopath, a psychopath. And even if the person is at the mercy of their diagnoses, you know, like sometimes somebody with bipolar disorder can be a pathological liar. It's still hard to swallow and deal with, right? Because even though they may be suffering in some way, because their lies often catch up to them, or, you know, things kind of shift on them and they don't know what to say. So a lie comes out, you know, those people are still difficult to have in your life, right, Jessica J? Even though they may be at the mercy of a diagnosis. You know, a liar is somebody that you can't get around, right? Because you don't know what's truth and what's a lie until you start catching on. And then you realize, okay, this is another lie. And I don't feel right listening to this because this doesn't feel natural. This doesn't feel like it's truth, right? So yes, Jessica J, I'm with you. I don't want to seem like I'm cold to people who engage in pathological lying or compulsive lying, but I'm with you as well. Chastity C, hello and welcome. Good to see you. Welcome to the channel. She says the Twilight Zone. That's what it feels like you're in, right? Yeah. The Good Glow says lying too is a defense and coping mechanism, very much so, which is basically what's called that ego-driven lying, right? Excuse me, they're doing it for some purpose and some reason. All right, let me keep scrolling, guys. Phoenix, so good to see you. And I truly hope that you're doing okay. I see that you say your mom is fighting for her life in the ICU. Ugh, I've been there with my mom, so I totally understand, Phoenix. I'm so very sorry. Just hang on. And one thing I wish someone would have told me when I was in the ICU with my mom in February, my brother and I, was to go home, get some rest, come back. If you want to bring your pillows or whatever and sleep next to your mom, that's what I did. You can, whatever it is that you need to do to get through that moment. So I will definitely keep you in my prayers. Hang in there. That's really tough. All right, guys, I'm going to go back to the content just a minute. I need one more comment because I don't want to miss any of you. Stacy Del Butia, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Hope you're doing well this week. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say there. Okay, one last comment. Actually Jovial, hello and welcome. Good to see you. You're my last one, and we're going back to the content. Actually Jovial, Sis Tamara, thank you for inspiring hope and life through all of your messages. Even with such an irritating topic, your commentary it exudes light and love. Seriously, I'm very grateful. That's so sweet. I'm going to highlight that. Thank you. I will take that, digest that. I'm grateful for that. Thank you. Thank you. All right, guys. What are these common behaviors? Let's jump in, okay? Let me say one thing before we jump into the common issues. Do you wonder if you should address and confront the liar, or should you ignore? I had a family come in the other day, new clients, totally like them. The question was, what do I do when this person lies? And I know it's a lie. Do I confront it and squash it? Or do I ignore it? And my broad response to that was, I encourage you to inspect your inner man. I just believe some of us can be very intuitive. And if you feel like it's a lie, it's most likely a lie, right? We're not talking about fear that we can feel that a person is lying to us. We're talking about we're listening to the lie, we're being non-judgmental, but somewhere on the inside, this is not clicking for you. So that's number one. The other piece of this is it depends on the person. So you have to be careful if you confront a liar, because if they are the kind of liar who has driven or ego-driven lies, and their ego is driving the bus, the last thing you want to do is say, why are you lying to me? I know you're lying. I saw you there. I got your text messages because you accidentally sent them to me. And A, B, and C happened, and I followed you, and I found out where you were. And the other person may say, you don't know what you're talking about. And you may say, oh, I don't? Okay, let me pull up what. I took some pictures while I was there too, And so you may have all of the proof that they're lying. But are they going to admit that? And are they going to say, okay, you're right. I'm sorry. I don't know why I lied. That is never going to happen. So do you confront them, or do you just ignore the lie? Again, depends on your intuition, depends on their personality in the situation. But then the third thing that I suggested is confront it. If you have, let's say, for example, in the experience of a child, a young child under the age of 10, we kind of expect them to like tweak the truth a little bit, right? But if we're talking about a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old who is telling lies to escape punishment, to kind of, manipulate a situation, I think it's okay to confront them and say, now, that is not true, and we're not going to do that. You don't want to develop a reputation of being a liar. So we are not going to lie. We're going to tell the truth. And I need you to tell me the truth. That is how I talk to my kids that come to therapy. Sometimes, I see them getting ready to lie and curtail the truth. And first I'll extend myself in love to them. And I'll say, is this hard to talk about? Or are we having a hard time? And then they may say, yeah. And I'll say, it's okay. We're not going to lie. We're not going to act like this is not happening. Let's just talk about it. What is the issue? And they open up. Now, if you're talking about a 13 to 19-year-old person, you may want to be a little bit more strategic when it comes to your confrontation skills. If we're talking about a sociopath, right, or narcissist, you want to be wise with your approach to them. Don't confront a narcissist with their lies, and don't confront a sociopath with their lies, because they're going to always top you somehow. So you confront a sociopath or narcissist, okay, what's going to happen is they're going to explode. And that explosion is going to mean you're going to get hurt. You're going to be offended. Something bad is going to happen to you down the line. They're going to mistreat you. They're going to reveal something about you, right? There's always this dark-seated vendetta or this deep-seated, vendetta against you if the person's a narcissist and a sociopath, and you're sitting there saying to them, I know you're lying, right? Because their ego has now been slashed. And we don't expect them to say, you know what, I'm just going to put a Band-Aid on that and keep moving. No, they are going to explode, retaliate, or do something evil to you. And that is not what we want. What does research say? And I've also seen this in clinical settings, are common behaviors of these kind of liars: self-aggrandizement. Sometimes pathological lying, as we talked about earlier, is driven by the ego. So self-aggrandizement says, I'm going to pump myself up. I'm going to lord over you. I'm going to use my badge. I'm going to use my degree, my college experience, my status as a doctor, as a lawyer. I'm going to use that against you by building myself so high above you that you can't see straight. So, I'm going to pump myself up there. So self-aggrandizement. The other thing is con behavior, right? So those who kind of have their hand out, they're also sometimes pathological liars and compulsive liars. They con people. I want that. I want that. I want that. And so what do? Well, they manipulate the person on the street. They act like they're homeless and get money off the street. They are selling drugs to get money, but they blow up that, image of selling drugs, and they become pimps and thugs, and the list goes on. And so there's a conning aspect, right? A con aspect to pathological and compulsive lying. They also have this doubling down resistance, and doubling down resistance is, oh, so you're going to address me and tell me I'm a liar? Well, this is going to get really rough on you. And so then that's when the lies start about you, and that's when the rumors start, and that's when, you may get the police at your front door doing a wellness check. That's when you are maybe having somebody do something behind your back, right? Take your name off of a will if they can, because you have hit them, you've hurt them, or in some way you've made them feel what they don't want to feel, which is that they are liars. So because of that, you now get this punishment, and so they double down. Their resistance is sharp, The other thing is they may also have a primary diagnosis. They may have borderline personality disorder. Research suggests that those who have borderline personality disorder may lie at times to cover their feelings, to, prevent abandonment, to express an emotion, if you will, to make somebody else jealous or miss them. God only knows what, right? But those that have a borderline personality may engage in pathological lying, right? My throat is dry again. So sorry, guys. Hold on. Excuse me. In addition to that, narcissists or pathological liars, that's a diagnosis where lying happens. Bipolar disorder can also precede lying. Of course, sociopaths, people with antisocial personality disorder. And here's one that you guys may not hear much of: intermittent explosive disorder. There's a connection between sometimes lying and compulsive lying and pathological lying and impulse control disorders or intermittent explosive disorders. So impulse control disorders are ADHD, what's that other thing? Lying behaviors, intermittent explosive disorder, impulse disorders that make it really hard for you to kind of think before you act. So you don't think and process, you just act. And compulsive lying and pathological lying can be that way as well. Automatically, when you get in front of somebody who makes you anxious, boom, there's a lie, and it's an impulse control disorder because you can't reel that boat back in. Once it's out, and you can't reel it in because you're impulsive, right? So people who have impulse control disorders, trichotillomania is another one. That's the pulling of the eyebrows and the eyelashes, right? Hair off the body repetitively. That is also an impulse control disorder. It's before I yank my eyelashes out, I'm not able to pump the brakes and pause. And so individuals who are that way can also engage in pathological lying. That is just who they are. Learned and reinforced behavior. Children who grow up in households under parents who lie, whether they think it's a good lie or a negative lie, it encourages the culture of lying. I had a client 2 years ago who kind of developed his entire family on lies. He lied to his wife and told his wife that he was making a lot of money, over $500,000 a year, which was not true. He was making closer to $80,000 a year, not $500,000. So he lied about that. He lied on his taxes. He claimed people on his taxes that shouldn't have been claimed. He also lied to his children. When mom was institutionalized for at least 5 months because of a severe psychotic break, he lied to his children and said, mom is in the army and that is where mom is going to be. So anytime they saw a flag or anytime there was some kind of patriotism or support of this country, he would say, look at that, kids, that is your mother. She is fighting for this country, and the list goes on. And so by the time his daughter, who was seeing me for therapy, hit 16 years of age, which is when she started with me, she and I both uncovered all these lies, and what we both found, to our surprise, is mom had been institutionalized for 5 months. He was a felon. He never shared with his children that he had caught a felony while fighting with the police. He lied on his taxes and claimed his nieces and nephews who were not dependents on his taxes. He was legally charged for that. And on top of all of this, dad was having an affair with a woman outside of the family. And so his life was built on lies. So what happened to his 12-year-old son? Thank God his 16-year-old daughter didn't go this way, but his 12-year-old son started lying, and it started as white lies. And then his mother was like, can you please see him for therapy? And the white lie, I said, yes, I'll take him on. So I had him as a client, but then his white lies morphed into bigger lies. And then it morphed into dangerous lies. And now this young man is, I think, 15 or 16. And I've had to refer him up to a higher level of care because his lies were so entrenched and so deep that it wasn't appropriate for him to be in a private practice. He needed to be in an agency where he was going to be around a doctor at all times and, around people who can kind of call him out on his behavior. So a person who is around lying, that's my point here, constantly around lying, engages in that. Now, let me just briefly share some research with you. And then, guys, I have to go because it's 8:00. And I want to talk to you, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. But in this dynamic of being a pathological and compulsive liar, some of the research suggests that people who have low self-esteem lie, people who have dark triad traits lie, and that's Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. They also struggle with being honest. They are liars, everything they say. The personality trait of agreeableness, that kind of makes it easier, it makes it easier for people to tell the truth when they have a personality of agreeableness. Sometimes they're people pleasers. Sometimes they just want to make sure that they're doing the right thing at all times. And so that makes it easier for them. But a person who has low agreeableness, they're going to lie every chance they get. Research also suggests that even though 3-year-olds lie, 5-year-olds lie, sometimes 10-year-olds, it really starts in adolescence. And that's when the ball gets running. That's when it gets going into adulthood, and the lies become little, moderate to severe. And so you're going to see that. You're going to see in adolescence the curtailing of the truth, the self-deception, the hiding behind facades. All of that starts in adolescence. Now, if you guys want a quick, minimal definition of pathological lying, here's what you want to say. So there's 4 things. And I think this is the best way to define pathological lying. Pathological lying happens when there's absolutely no benefit. None. No benefit whatsoever. Stories tend to be dramatic, stretched, just something about that lie doesn't feel right. It's like they're making it bigger and bolder than it needs to be. And they've lost their genuinity as a result. So there's chronically no benefit. They stretch their stories to a point where it doesn't look believable. They're often, this is number 3, they are often victims or heroes. So they're going to either shine the light on themselves as being heroes or people that have some kind of value to them at all times. They don't do anything wrong. Or they're going to, I thought it was raining. Sorry, guys. Or they're going to cloak themselves as being a victim. Okay. So chronically no benefit to their lies. They tend to have dramatic and very stretched lies. They see themselves as victims or heroes, if you will, for lack of a clinical term. And the lie is often conscious deceit. They know what they are doing. That to me is the best way to define in 4 different ways pathological lying. This is who they are. Now, I'm going to go to the chat box in just a second here. I just want to list here how to deal with these people because I've dealt with them personally, professionally, my colleagues, you guys. It's like, how do you deal with these people? I gave you a little bit of a clue earlier by saying you may not want to confront them. Maybe you just want to ignore. Other times you may want to question how to confront, and you want to really go off of who they are as a person and your intuition. But the other thing is don't feed it and don't ignore it. You research in psychology suggests that once you start feeding the lies, in a sense, either you start believing them yourself or you're not holding that person accountable for what you and they both know is true. So you don't want to feed it, but you also don't want to ignore it, because if you say, you know what, I'm not talking to him because all he does is lie. Ignoring the lie only makes it worse. If you have a chronic liar in your family, the last thing you want to do is look at that chronic liar and say, really? You went to Hawaii? When did that happen? When did you get your passport? And they may say, a month ago. Weren't you in California a month ago and you didn't have access to? And they may say, no, I was there. No, you weren't. And you may go to your phone and say, because you sent me this text, and you may really be getting to a point where the truth is getting ready to be known, and that pathological liar is going to do what? They are going to look at you and say, you know what? I don't know why you don't believe me. But that's your problem. I'm telling you the truth. And they're going to stand on that, right? But again, you don't want to ignore that, and you don't want to minimize that. It's okay for you to say, I truly don't believe you, but we'll go with it. You can say that, or you can say, I don't believe that happened. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. So you don't want to ignore it and you don't want to feed it. So you want to find that proper middle ground, Understand why they do it. the motivation behind it can sometimes help you understand the person. Why are you lying? Because I feel lower than everybody in life. So my ego takes a hit. So now I'm going to lie to bring it up to a place where I feel it's important, right? Another motivation for a lie might be, I really need to get that job. I need to get a really good job. So I'm going to lie on my resume. You know, I'm going to lie here. I'm going to lie there. I'm going to dress the part, look the part, act the part, and hope they believe my lie. You know, so you want to understand the motivation. If it's a situation where a person is domestically violent, right? What are they lying to you for? Well, they're lying because they may see you as a less than person, right? You're not as important as they are. This may be another form of domestic abuse, right? You really do want to look at it and say, what is happening here? What is the motivation? And if not the motivation, what is, oh God, I lost what I was going to say. If not the motivation, oh darn, I lost what I was going to say. Don't you hate that? That's my third time this week going completely blank. Darn. Okay, well, we're gonna keep going on. Okay, guys, it'll come to me by the time we end this, I'm sure. But again, you just want to understand the motivation, and if not the motivation, you want to understand, what is it that they could be getting out of this. Are they getting some kind of internal reward from this, or are they getting some kind of social and external reward, right? So you want to understand the motivation. Consider that the brain may be to blame. Lying really shuts down different parts of the brain. There's higher activity in certain areas of the brain. The prefrontal cortex, which is behind the forehead, below and behind the forehead, there is where our executive functioning is, and that's decision making. That's a little bit of personality development. That's an impulse control, right? That's our ability to reason and make sense out of reality. And so there tends to be less activity in the frontal lobes and the prefrontal cortex with pathological liars. So the brain could be to blame. So you want to make sure that you digest that and kind of understand what the brain has to do with this. I did talk about it in my video posted on Wednesday, so go back and check that out. Because it'll give you some insight there. You also want to consider the source. Where is this coming from? Well, grandma's a liar, Aunt Cece's a liar, Aunt BB is also a liar, and so is my mother. So that's the source. So I'm not going to get any truth out of our relationship as a family, because you are following in the same footsteps or in the same path of those family members who have engaged in lying. So you want to consider the source. Sometimes that will help you tease apart what's truth and what's fiction, because that, wait a minute, this is not the truth, because they've gotten into a habit of telling lies, right? The other thing is, ask questions. The more questions, the merrier. Sometimes I do that when I need to. So if I'm interviewing someone, or if I'm trying to clinically diagnose, I'll ask a bunch of questions, and I do keep timelines in my mind. So you said 5 years of age is when the oppositional defiance started. Yes. And I'll say, okay, very well. And then when did it seem to end? Oh, at the age of 12. Okay, at the age of 12. And that was what year? And, my client will sometimes say, that was in 2018. And I'll say, okay, and how was the years following 2018? And the client may say, well, I don't know what you mean. And then I'll say, was your child engaging in defiance after 2018? And then they'll say, yes, I think, I'm not sure. And then I'll say, okay, are you leaning more towards your sure? And the client may say yes. And I'll say, okay, so 2018 is really when this started. And we'll go on from there. The more questions, the more clarification you will get, because the person who's answering your questions has to pause and process. Am I telling the truth here? Is this being inspected? Will this come back around to bite me later if I tell a lie? Does this timeline not make sense? Do these lies not add up in her mind? Do I need to change something, or do I need to just be honest? So asking questions is a powerful tool because it causes that person to slightly be nudged towards the truth a little at a time, if that makes sense. If you've ever seen a judge or an attorney interview someone, you'll know what I mean. They ask a bunch of questions, and it's really to kind of strip all of that fluff that comes from a person who lies. It's to get them closer and closer to reality. So ask questions. You want to focus on their words and their tone of voice and not what they're saying. When you clearly understand that somebody is a liar, you do not want to believe their body language per se, because that can be manipulated. You don't want to believe you don't want to put all your trust in their heart rate, right? If you see them breathing heavily and they seem nervous, that may not be a sure sign of anything, right? So you really want to look at, and this is what research backs as well, look at their words, right? What are they saying to me? What do they mean? What are they getting at, right? And then their tone. You know, you've seen kids lie. Teenagers, they'll come in and say something and then they just trail off with whispering. You know, I went over my friend's house the other day and we partied, and sometimes I have to say, I'm sorry, say that again. And they'll say, I went over my friend's house and we had a party and it was all of us there. And I'll have to say, okay, let's do that again. But I need you to speak up and I need you to go slowly. So you said you went over your friend's house and what? And then they'll come back and say, we partied and we had drinks and I know it's wrong. Boom. You know, so look for their words, listen to their tone. That makes sense. And that can't be manipulated necessarily. Body language can. So you want to stick to those two. Let them talk. Sometimes people will talk themselves right into the truth, right? They just talk until something doesn't add up and then they get caught. Or sometimes they'll talk and the truth will come out and they don't mean it to come out, you know? So let them talk. Ask open-ended questions, meaning give them a lot of space to explain. You know, you don't want to ask them, so how was your day? Good. What'd you do today? Nothing. Did you meet your teacher? Yep. Did you like your teacher? Nope. Those are closed-ended questions, right? Because a person can answer them with one response, you know? So you want to ask open-ended questions. What did you do today in school? Tell me how you feel about the whole experience. Boom. There's an open-ended question. Now they have to kind of search and give you a lot. Another open-ended question for those who have toxic families. Maybe you want to ask your father why he had an affair. Dad, is there any reason why you had an affair? You know, did mom do something wrong? I'm just trying to understand what happened there. I never understood it. So maybe you can tell me why. That gives dad a lot of room to figure out how he's going to respond to you. So ask those open-ended questions. And lastly, in this category, try to keep in mind and remember that the lie is not always there to protect their ego. It's not always there to protect some truth. It is sometimes there because that is what they do. They lie, you know, and there may be absolutely no motivation, no benefit, and no direction for the lie, but they will lie because that is who they are. This is rough, right, guys? It's hard to deal with a pathological liar. I personally cannot deal with them, and I will not. You know, for those of you who are over the age of 35, I'm sure you feel like me. I am too old to deal with lies. I don't have time. Okay. My time is getting shorter and shorter every year. On top of that, I don't want to be lied to, right? And I don't care for ingenuine people who cover and cloak and lie. You know, I'm sure you guys can relate to that. It's a really tough subject. Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about something slightly similar, but you're gonna want to come back tomorrow because we're gonna get into this just a little bit more. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap up here because I'm way late. Mr. Kankan, hello and welcome. Good to see you, everybody. In my entire whole life, have always said that I look Ethiopian. Maybe one day I'll share my cultural roots with you because it's not just one cultural roots. It's a pretty interesting mixture in my family, and I swear we all look different. You know, my grandfather's side of his family looks one way. My late grandmother's side of the family looks another way, and there I am in the middle looking this way for a reason. And then my brothers look different. Like literally, we all look different. So our culture is quite interesting. But no, I'm not Ethiopian. But the women are beautiful, aren't they? Yeah. Thank you. I see that as a compliment. Thank you so much. Main house, good to see you, my friend. Hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. Haven't seen you in a while. I'm going to leave that up there so people can see it. Jessica J says, you're welcome, Jessica J. She says, thank you for this valuable information. This validates the fact that it's not our problem. It's their problem. I cave in too many times to these people. Yeah, you're welcome, Jessica J. And I very much agree. You can start to take on that burden, right? And that burden is, why is this person lying to me? And now why are they mad because I called out the lie, or I asked for verification, or I asked for clarification? You know what I mean? And it can make you feel bad. Yeah, it does. All right, guys, I'm going to keep scrolling. James McDonald says, yep, I resonate with minimizing as a form of self-protection. I done it for years in regards with family, as a form of self-protection. And of course, I'm aware now this was all unconscious behavior. Yes. Well said, James. It is unconscious behavior. 100%. Bree, hello. Welcome. Good to see you tonight. And thank you for gifting someone with a membership. Let me look at this. You gifted 5 people with a membership. I'm going to put this up here. Bree, you're just so wonderful. Thank you for that selflessness. And I don't know, is this tonight too? Yes, it is. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. And thank you for that. That's so kind. Thank you. And then I think you did another one. Thank you for the super chat. That's so sweet. I think that's tonight. Are all of these tonight? Yeah, I think these. Yes, that's true. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate you as well. I might as well just get everybody in here. And then Bree is gifting people with more memberships. That's so wonderful. Thank you for the super chat, Bree. And thank you for continuing to gift people. That's so wonderful. Thank you. Good Vibes. Hello and welcome. Good to see you tonight. We're going to sign off here in a little bit. Good Vibes says, glad to be a part of this discourse, Tamara. Will you consider taking a deep dive explaining fictitious disorder and how different it is from compulsive and pathological lying in the near future? I can definitely put it on the list. We know fictitious disorder is it's more of a psychological condition that causes a person to kind of feign, is that the word I'm looking for? They kind of throw out there a disorder, and they may even digest, for lack of a clinical term, that disorder's symptoms and what seems to be a part of that diagnosis, so that they can get attention, money, lawsuits, the list goes on. So I can definitely bring that to the table. Yeah, that's where I'm going to leave that, because I can go on and on and on. V Bliss, hello and welcome. Good to see you. Welcome to the channel. V Bliss says, I can't stand liars more than anything. The truth is so easy. Why even lie? Right. It's easy to us, right? It's easy to those of us who don't like lying. It's not easy to them. It isn't. Yeah. Valerie says, I'm an introvert as well. See? Yeah. And we're not so bad, right? Yeah. Yeah. I dread grocery stores. I dread Walmart. I dread Target. I go to curbside pickup as often as I can. And people who are extroverted scare me. But no, I'm just being facetious. I have like a button. I can be an ambivert. Is that what it is? I can be socially engaged for that many hours, and then my button goes off. Maybe I'll wear it tomorrow. I literally have a shirt that says my social battery, and it has like the time from like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then it shows you a battery, and the battery shows different levels. I had to buy that shirt. So maybe I'll wear it just to be funny tomorrow. Axe to Edge says they want me to co-sign to their insanity, delusions, and lies. Yeah. They want you to agree with it, because if you agree to or you believe their lies, then their lies are true to themselves. You know? All right, so let me keep moving. Callie, me, CP, hello and welcome. Glad to have you. Ooh, I like grill out dinners. Yeah, good for you. That is some self-love and self-care there. Yeah. Sun and Sunflower says, bringing back memories with my family selling Avon. Tamara sounds like she was such an extrovert. Well, she was. She was. And she would drag me on those trips, Sun and Sunflowers, to sell Avon. And I was like this peppy little girl. And my grandmother drugged me everywhere to sell Avon. It was just. Let me show you this. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can show you this. I don't know how to do this without showing you guys the entire thing. All right, hold on, guys. Bear with me. I'm trying to do something here. So my grandmother, just for laughs, I'll show you. My grandmother forced me to pose for her. Yeah, this works good. She forced me to pose for her so she could put my childhood photo on the back of her Avon cards. So she got it blown up, and this is the picture when she was with us. This is the picture of me. Can you see that? That's the picture of me as a little girl. And my grandmother literally had me pose like that. She had me pose like that so that I could help her sew Avon. Can you believe it, guys? Something was wrong with her. I think she encouraged me to understand the mind at a very young age. And so I have that picture up on the wall. It reminds me of her. But that's exactly what she did. She's like, T pose, and I was the cute little girl. Nothing was wrong with me then. I didn't have ailments. I was happy. The list goes on. And so she used that to get her some more Avon orders. So Sun and Sunflowers, you're right. She was an extrovert and tried to make me one. It only worked for that picture. And then after that, I cried every day. She drugged me along. So Nancy R, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. I missed you. I'm sorry. I'm so far back in the comments, but I do want to say hello to you, and then we're going to sign off. Janine MacArthur, hi, Miss Janine. Good to see you. Welcome back tonight. She says, I'm so glad. I know when I get called a liar, I know better. If I'm not completely accurate about something that I'm totally unaware of, that's it. Sincerely unaware, by the way. Yeah, sometimes you are sincerely unaware. I think the difference here is when you're sincerely unaware, you don't have a goal. There's no goal in mind, or you're not trying to get over on somebody or manipulate somebody, So that's kind of what makes the difference there, for sure. Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's important. Thank you, Bree. I always love seeing you guys here and continually coming back video after video and chat after chat. So thank you so much for that. Stacy Del Buccia says, lying is just so evil. I very much agree with that. I'm so glad you said that. I'm going to star your comment. All right, let me keep moving. Leslie A, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. She says, thanks for sharing your experience or your expert experience with us. It helps so much. Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. So glad. Sylvie says, good night, Tamara. Good night. Good to see you. Laura Fitz says, sounds like my mother-in-law. You can't get a word in. Yeah, what do you do when they're like that? You know what I mean? Amy 99, hello and welcome. Good to see you tonight. Just want to make sure I get some of you in here. Thank you so much. I'm going to say, is it Isis or Jesus? Forgive me. I always mess up your screen name. I'm so sorry. But I appreciate that. I'm so glad it's a live stream that you could be a part of. You always have great comments. So I see you periodically on the channel, so good to see you. Okay, Alive, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Welcome to the channel. Alive says, I had to hide PTSD symptoms in a work environment where I was always triggered. I hated hiding it because it felt like lying. Yeah. I resented that healthy people could show their full emotions. Yeah, I totally understand that. It's okay. You're not lying when you are hiding a medical condition, when you are hiding a mental health condition from the world. You have that personal right to say, this is as far as I'm going with you. Even when I share stories, when I share professional stories, when I share personal stories, when I show you my photos as a child, just to make a funny point and to be facetious, it's what I'm choosing to do because I'm not seeing the danger in it at the point, right? The benefit outweighs the danger. And so you can be the same way, right? I'm not going to show you where I live. I'm not going to show you what car I drive. I'm also not going to tell you all my personal family business. And that's not lying. I'm holding back what belongs to me. And this is what belongs to me. I've shared on this channel many times. My mom had a stroke in February. You know, I share that with all of you because I thought there has to be some way to build a closer connection with my community and let them know I didn't just neglect you guys for almost a whole week. I was literally in a hospital with my mom, and that transformed into a greater relationship with all of you on the channel. It feels, you know, and it's relatable, right? But I have a right to not share everything about my mom's stroke too. And I have a right to also not share everything about my personal life. So you're not lying. You're simply saying, by keeping that information to you, this belongs to me. And it is only when I build a close bond and I can trust you that I share this, you know? I hope that helps Alive. Ease your mind a little bit. I appreciate people like that. They know when to say something. They know when to be quiet. Scene 68, hello and welcome. Good to see you. Yeah, same here. Yeah, I hope you have a really good night tonight. You need it, I'm sure. I think we all do. Keith B, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. All right, let me keep moving. Thank you so much, Nancy. I got a lot of compliments on these earrings today. My grandmother actually bought them for me before she passed away. It was a Christmas gift, so thank you. Okay. Yeah. Amy99 says, I dislike liars because of my family. I get triggered when someone lies. Yeah. Me too. One more, and we're going to go. Two more. Denise Robinette. Thank you so much for that. I'm so glad. They do feel like sessions, right? Yeah. Whoops, wrong comment. MS, you're my last one before we go. MS says, would you say that crazy making is the same or similar to pathological lying? Yes and no. Absolutely. In some respects, not so much in other respects. But to make this a short reply to that, I think it's a little bit of well, let me take that back. Because again, you want to think of this. I can see how you can think it because I almost went that way too. Pathological lying often either doesn't have a goal or does have a goal. Crazy making has a goal, which is to shift the attention and the blame. You know, pathological lying doesn't always have a clear reason for why it's happening. Does that make sense? So I would say they are slightly different. You know, I almost went for that. Yeah, they are the same, but I think that's a fundamental difference there. Crazy making is a shifting of responsibility in a sense, whereas pathological lying often does or does not have a real purpose, you know? I guess you can see how complicated psychology can be, right, MS? All right, guys, I love you so much. Thank you for supporting each other in the chat. You know, I see the chat just scrolling on the side of my, from the side of my eye, every live chat. And I love to see you guys comment and say things and engage with each other and love each other. Even though we don't really know each other, we do know each other, right? And that's beautiful. So come join me tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. I'm going to do one more live chat tomorrow. And I think you're going to like that one. So stick around. I hope you have a wonderful Friday night. Bye, guys.